tonight we're going to talk about, I compete in several different disciplines, but tonight we're going to talk about the fast-growing sport of cowboy action shooting.
Cowboy action shooting. Now, obviously these are all cowboy guns.
These are all cowboy guns here, and
right.
This is the kind of things that we use in actual competition.
So can you kind of explain like where this was born, and are there other competitions like this? What makes this competition unique?
First, cowboy action shooting has been around since the early 1980s. A group of friends that were regular competitors at various kinds of shooting disciplines were sitting around one day and they said, you know, we've done all of this before. You know what would be really fun? What if next week we come and we shoot together like it was the Old West? You know, we'll wear a pair of jeans and some cowboy boots and get out some old single actions and some old lever actions, just like it was the Old West, and we'll shoot that way. And this is kind of anti-technology, but they all got together. They had such a good time. They said, we should do this next month. They had such a good time the next month. Everybody around them at the shooting range said, hey, we'd like to try that too. And from that beginning, back in the early 1980s, the sport of cowboy action shooting was born.
So is this similar to, like, I'm familiar a little bit with the three-gun competitions. Is it similar to that?
Three-gun competition, if you're not familiar with that, uses modern pistols, modern rifles, and modern shotguns, and you engage targets from 5 yards to 250 or 300 yards using the appropriate weapon at the appropriate time, using modern weapons. Cowboy action shooting is much like that, but we're using period firearms,
right? Which
creates a whole raft of difficulties. I will circle back to this with some regularity. These firearms were never meant to be used as fast, as hard, or as often as we use them. If you were a cowboy, pardon me, if you were a cowboy back in 1873, this is a replica of an 1873 Colt single-action Army. You purchased this gun, and you probably never fired a box of shells in your entire life.
It was like an emergency.
This was absolutely an emergency. Maybe you went hunting with a rifle, but you fired a shot a year or a couple of shots a year just to keep the family fed. A good shooter, a good shooting match, typically is 180 rounds out of the pistol and rifle, and another 60 rounds out of the shotgun, and you do that as many times a month as you wish. Los Angeles, because this is where the sport was born, Los Angeles is a hotbed for the sport, and within 60 minutes of where we're sitting right now, you could compete every Saturday and Sunday at a different match. It's that popular a sport. It now has about 120,000 members to the sport, and I can promise you this sport has taken me all across the United States and around the world, because for a long time I was one of the lead instructors for the parent organization of this, which is called S.A.S.S, or the Single Action Shooting Society. And that refers to the kind of firearm that this is. This is what's known as a single action revolver. I want to make sure that everybody understands this pistol is completely safe to handle. A single action refers to the job that the trigger does. With this particular firearm, in order to fire it, and this was great technology back in 1873, with this particular firearm, in order to fire the gun, you could pull the trigger all day and nothing will happen until you cock the hammer. Once you cock the hammer, if the gun is loaded, the gun is now ready to fire. And if you'd like to fire another shot, you have to cock the hammer again, and then again. And you do that until the chambers are ready.
So that's called single action.
That is a single action. The trigger does one job. It simply fires the gun.
As opposed to a double action.
A modern double action revolver, when you pull the trigger, it cocks the hammer for you, rotates the cylinder, bringing a fresh round under the hammer, and then fires the gun. But that's all modern technology that was just barely in evidence back at the time of the Old West.
So this is where you see the cowboys doing the...
Well,
what is this called?
I know that this fanning, and it looks great, but it's not really an effective way to shoot, because the sport is based around speed and accuracy. Typically, there will be 24 shots on a stage. Out of reverence for the old pistols, what we do is we load 5 rounds in each. I know it's called a 6-shooter, but in the old days, the firing pin on the hammer would rest directly on top of a loaded cartridge. And imagine, if you will, I'm going to stand up. I don't know if I'm going to go out of frame here, but imagine, if you will, you're a cowboy.
We got a wide shot here that we can go to.
In the Old West, you're a cowboy. You get up in the morning, you pull on your trousers, buckle on your gun belt, and you go to saddle your horse. throw a saddle blanket on the horse, throw a saddle on the horse, and you go to tighten the cinch. That's the strap underneath the horse that holds the saddle in place. It's important you do this. Well, the horse doesn't necessarily want to be saddled because he knows he's got a day of work in front of him. So the horse immediately goes, you go to tighten, and so you take the stirrup and you put the stirrup over the horn of the saddle and you punch the horse. This is not animal abuse. You go, boom, and the horse goes, and you just grab that cinch and you tighten it. You know horses, don't you? Well, if you've got your gun right here, you yank that cinch, and once in a while, remember that big heavy stirrup you had over the saddle horn? Once in a while, yank it, and that stirrup would fall down, and it would strike the hammer of the gun, and it could fire the gun. Now, modern pistols are made with safety features, so that literally cannot happen. But out of reverence to the fact that there are some of those old pistols still in use, and just the Old West, we only load 5 rounds in the pistol. So you always have the hammer down on an empty chamber. All right?
Interesting.
So you'll fire, the trick is to fire the 24 rounds, typically 10 rifle, 10 pistol, because we use 2 6 guns with 5 shots each. And then typically 4 or 6 or 8 shotgun. And the trick is to fire those shots at the targets in the quickest amount of time, but any misses add 5 seconds to your score. So as you're shooting, you have to pay attention to speed and accuracy. So the trick is shoot it as fast as you can, but kind of keep it in your trousers, because it is entirely possible to shoot a stage and have more time in penalties than you did in raw time on the stage just by missing.
So let's talk about that.
Let's go back to what you said.
Say you could unload all 24 shots in 3 seconds. What's your penalty time wind up being with missing every single shot?
That would depend on how many targets you hit and missed.
Does anybody play that game, or is the 24 shot? Okay, so it's 24 times 5 seconds, right?
You can do the math. You're looking at
a couple minutes, right? So yeah, so nobody tries to game the system and
it's over 100 seconds. So you're dying there.
So what's a normal good time? So
a
people
good
can
time
have
is any time
perspective.
you get to go shooting, honestly.
that's for sure.
And that is the basic ethos of the sport, honestly. The trick is to have as much fun as you possibly can. I am a state, national, and world champion.
Okay.
And my good times are going to be that's going to be decided by how difficult are the stages. Are the targets close together? And are they close to you? Are they distant? Are they widely separated? Do you have to run from position to position to position? That sort of thing will all figure into the kind of stage times you'll have. My par time for most matches here on the West Coast, I'm looking at 14 or 15 seconds a stage.
Wow.
24 aimed shots, 4 different firearms, and I need to be in 15 seconds to be
So a miss will totally
You add
hose
5
your
seconds
time.
to that, now you're at 20. 2 misses, you're at 25, and the rest of the field has caught up with me. 3 misses, now I'm at 30 seconds.
You're done.
And little old ladies and guys, pushing the oxygen bottles are getting started.
That's still fast. 30 seconds is roughly a second per shot, right?
Honestly, with this, yes, that's about a second per shot. And honestly, at this point in the trajectory of the sport, anybody who can shoot a stage in 25 seconds or less is deemed a very interesting individual. And that's the car you start looking for in the parking lot when you show up to the match.
The most interesting man in the sport. You have the beard for it. You gave us some videos, right?
I did.
So I just so everybody has context, I want to. Do we have a good one that has a match that you can?
There's one that says, I think, good stage, which I think is probably
good stage.
I'm hoping it's a pretty good stage.
Why don't we run that video? Good. Switch that video. Yeah, everybody can see it, right?
Hello, you idiot! Stand by.
Put that up, program, so the YouTube can see it. So I want to play that one more time for the YouTube, because the YouTube didn't see that. We got to switch over to the graphic there. But YouTube probably heard it.
This was filmed at the California State Championship.
And everybody here saw it, right? It's fast. So one more time on that video. It's only 24 seconds, right? There we go.
And you'll notice I'm using the rifle,
Hello,
2 pistols, shotgun.
Stand by.
Now, do you see what my left hand is doing? There are two kinds of shotguns commonly available in this sport. There is a side-by-side shotgun, which is fairly obvious, has two barrels in it. And then you have the one pump-action shotgun, which is allowed, which is an 1897 Winchester, and the design originated in 1893 and was modified in 1897. It's a very archaic design. Well, because the magazine tube will hold more than 2 rounds, to keep the sport fair and competitive between the side-by-side and the pump-action shotguns, the guns all start loaded except for the shotgun. The shotgun has to be loaded off your body while you're shooting. So if I'm shooting a 15-second stage, that's 20 shots out of firearms which have been loaded, but then I have to load the shotgun as I'm going.
Even the first shell?
Even the first shell.
So I noticed you have a belt up here. So you've got the shot shells.
That would be the shot shell belt, absolutely.
So can I handle this? Can I see this?
Gun is clear and safe.
I can see that, right? the chamber's empty. So I noticed that you reached over like this to load. Is that the key versus the? In
the architecture of the sport, that's kind of old school. But what we do is,
look how old. I don't even know where the release is on this. Is this it? Oh.
Either pull the trigger or press the button on the side. And
that button?
Yep.
That one.
That's your slide release.
Am I not strong enough?
Press hard. I don't know if that's ever been used for that. So.
Well, it's clear, so there it goes.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're pushing the this
one. That's the one. That's actually very nice.
This has been extensively gunsmithed.
Okay.
As have been most of the firearms.
So yeah, you mentioned earlier, there you go. You mentioned earlier that maintenance was kind of a problem because they're not.
Again, they were never meant to be used this much, this hard, and this fast. Let's take a second. Pistol is cleared and loaded with dummies. Go ahead and try the action on this. One of the things that you will notice is it's really quite easy to cock. It's kind of silky, isn't it? And the trigger is perfectly bounced. 3.3 pounds.
Yeah, I can't even feel it.
Yeah.
Like you can't even feel it break at all.
This is a professional.
Gun people will have to come here and feel this trigger because it really is
pretty sweet.
Yeah, there's no there's a break on a trigger. There's nothing. It's just smooth until it.
Okay, would you like the good news or the bad news? Those are my B guns. I don't use these in competition because they're not fast enough.
So the dummy rounds in this is you don't want to dry fire that gun.
The dummy rounds are to cushion the firing pin,
so it doesn't slam against.
I do dry fire quite a lot. I hate to say how often I practice because I could be a millionaire stockbroker if I would use that time perhaps more fruitfully. But I do practice every day, and dry fire is an important part of my regimen. So yes, I keep the dummy rounds in to cushion the impact of the hammer and the firing pin.
Interesting. So you said that there was extensive gunsmithing done on your B gun.
On the B guns, and even more expensive on the A guns.
What does that mean for extensive gunsmithing?
One of the things that you'll notice, the jeweled hammers, that's just a little bit of foo-fra.
Right, the jeweling, which if you guys can, maybe I can hold one of these up.
Sure.
You can see the jeweling on here, which is a machining process that just kind of puts these little circles in there, right?
That's just for attractiveness. It does nothing to speed or help the firearm whatsoever.
But it seems like looking cool while you do this is an important part of the sport. Is that correct?
Do you think this is cool?
Yeah, man.
Then yes, looking cool. Part of the fun, of course, is how do I say this politely? The best part about this sport, like I said, I've done 3-gun, I've done IPSC, I've done IDP, I've shot all kinds of action pistol. This is the only sport that has a code of dress that is associated with it. You're supposed to look like something out of the Old West. And they take it very seriously because it's an important part of having fun.
Yeah.
And so the simple truth is, you get to dress like you're 12 years old, but the guns are real. This is Disneyland, right? And it doesn't just apply. Can I get Penny? Can you stand up here for just a second? It doesn't just apply to the
Come on up on stage, Penny, so you can see.
This is Miss Penny Ante.
Just right there. I think that we're on the wide shot here in front of the map. Yeah.
And Penny, like me, is an avid cowboy action shooter.
It's strange without my guns.
Make flex form. As you can see, she's attired. This is entirely correct for the Old West, right? And it looks utterly smashing.
These are actually the ones I use in
Yeah.
competition.
Anyway, every part of this is entirely classic, but at the same time, it's very practical. You'll notice the cutaway in the front of the skirt. So if we are on a stage where there are steps up or steps down or
Right.
logs that have to be over, she can get her legs up over that thing without any problem whatsoever. Another thing I want you to notice is you'll notice the ammunition loops in the front. Now, typically you'd think when you button your holsters, wouldn't you do the buckle up front? And the answer is you keep the rounds in front where you can get at them in a hurry. Oftentimes there are reloads, or at the speed at which we shoot, once in a while you will kick a round out unfired of, for example, the rifle. And remember, we're looking at a 15 to 20 second window to get this done. You kick a round out, that's a 5-second miss because you didn't engage the target with that, right? So you need to reload, get that thing in there, and if I can do it in less than 5 seconds, I'm saving time, right? So you keep the cartridges up front where you can get at them. The shotgun belt speaks for itself. We do have to load the shotgun to create parity between the side-by-side and the pump shotgun. So you keep the shotgun shells up front where you can get at them in a quick hurry. You asked
So
about
you
the
can
left hand.
can you load in less than 5 seconds?
Yes.
Are these real rounds or dummy rounds?
Those are dummy rounds.
Okay, so everything's a dummy round. Okay, well, this is a dummy round,
Oh,
right?
that is
Yep.
not a dummy round.
See, okay, all those military guys out in the audience are being.
Hand me a pistol, would you please?
I want to see a dummy round get loaded in 5 seconds. I feel like loading a real round might be.
Yeah, I should have brought my rifle.
This is a dummy round.
Red,
Right.
dummy, right?
See the difference
May
in
I?
the back of that?
Yeah.
So you're firing your rifle. A couple of techniques which you might learn about. You spit one out, reach down, stuff it in.
I don't know. I wasn't looking at my watch. Do it again. All right. I want to see this because this is fascinating. I want you to say, oh, I kicked around, and then reach down,
Okay.
grab that round.
Kick around, yo, reach down,
Here, I'll do
feed it in.
It was like 4 seconds, but that works, right?
Yep. Anytime
Yeah.
I say, listen, we change, we have regular matches at a couple of clubs, and I am one of the front competitors with a couple of other guys, and we were having a laugh over the fact that we have exchanged wins by less than a second, about
Wow.
15 times over the years. So
it's
yeah,
tight.
if I can, no, not now. If I can save a second, then that matters.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That is pretty amazing. But to really hit a time, you can't kick around. You can't have any misfires or anything, right?
If you hope to win,
Yeah. So now are these competitions are you do multiple and then you average kind of like you play golf. You may win a hole, you may lose a hole, but you're doing multiple like.
the scoring is just changed. They used to have a system in which they gave rank points, so how you finished on each stage was added to your total time. The game simplified just a few years ago, so now it's just total time. If there's a match with 8, 10, or 12 stages, and I do 15 on one, and 18 on one, and 17 on one, you simply add the time together, and the person with the lowest elapsed time wins.
So there's time to catch up and to kind of like fix like a one-off.
Over the last weekend, I shot a very interesting match with one of my favorite competitors.
Okay.
And this guy, I had a couple of fumbles early in the match, and I was clearly behind him.
You got to wait for him to fumble.
I hate leaving the game in the hands of someone else. That's exactly what had happened. And so we are shooting the match, and I'm creeping up on him, and I'm creeping up on him, and I'm creeping up on him, but it all came down to the last stage. And now we're shooting identical stages. And on the last stage, this guy took a miss. And that's how many seconds? That's 5 seconds. And that was enough time to give me the win. One of us folded under the pressure, and one of us did not. That's the game.
Yeah.
That is the game.
It's almost like you watch these guys do bowling, right? It's not hard to hit a
actually
strike.
don't, but go on.
But I mean, I don't know. I've seen The Big Lebowski, right? You know, and like it seems like it'd be pretty easy to throw a ball down. It's easy to hit a. What are the distance to the targets?
The distance of the targets vary, and that is kind of a regional thing. The organization, S.A.S.S, does put out a handbook in which they have recommended distances, but that varies very much from state to state, region to region, and even country to country.
But it's never so far that like if you take your time and line up, you're going to miss, right?
There is never, presuming that the guns are good, they're better than we are.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. And so theoretically, you should be able to clean every match, every time.
If you can take your time. But now you got
And
the
there
time
you go.
pressure.
It's kind of like skiing. If you think this hill is too easy, try going faster. If you think the targets are too close, just speed up a little bit and watch what happens. One of the favorite matches of everybody in cowboy action shooting is an event in Tombstone, Arizona called Border Town. This match is legendary. It takes place in Tombstone, for God's sake. You're walking down Allen Street, going to Big Nose Kate's and the Crystal Palace Saloon, down the streets literally that Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday walked down. You walk past the OK Corral where the famous shootout took place. This fills up every year, not just because of the historical location, because let's face it, Tombstone is really kind of go to nowhere, and it's about 160 miles past that. Anyway, the match itself is famous because of the size and location of the targets. It is the biggest and fastest match in cowboy action shooting, and the targets are the size of car doors, and they're from me to you for the pistol and from me to the podium for the rifle, and you go, my God, how could you ever miss a target? And you know what happens? You see how big those things are. You see how close they are. Remember what I said about keeping it in your trousers? Everybody starts going, I've never shot a gun this fast. I've never fired. And then you start spitting the rounds out over your shoulder, dropping the shotgun shells, dumping shots into the dirt. It's amazing how frustrating it can be. It's delightful. And if you miss a target at a match like that, and that's part of the ethos of the sport, of course, but if you miss a target like that, you know who did it to you. You did it to yourself.
Yeah. Now, so why we're talking about that is going to the extreme, going as fast as possible. I know if you go to a normal gun range and you start shooting fast, everybody gets pretty antsy.
Most ranges have a 1 round per second rule.
Yeah, and especially if you're drawing from a holster.
Most ranges will not allow
that. So now in your sport, you're doing that and you're pushing it faster and faster. How do they mitigate the safety of that, making sure someone doesn't shoot their foot off? Because I mean, they're pulling out as fast as they can. Oh, that target's right in front of me. How can I miss it? Oh, I shot my leg.
The nice thing about a single action pistol, it was any pistol, rifle, shotgun will only do what you tell it to. But remember where this has to be cocked for each shot? So I can pull this thing out, and as I'm pulling it out, in best gunfighter fashion, I'm pushing it into the target. And as I'm pushing it into the target, I'm cocking it. So the only time you get into trouble is if you are really on top of your hammer way too early, and it's almost difficult to do that.
Because of the angle.
Safe sport, just because of the angle. You can get on top of the hammer and pull it as you're drawing it, but you really have to make an effort. You'll see.
So again, all dummy rounds in here. I got to watch out because
always safety first.
Penny there.
Those are dummy rounds.
So yeah, when you're pulling out, because you're not, yeah, it'd be really hard. Like it's all thumb at that point,
Right.
as opposed to when you're like this and you're pushing forward.
Got it.
Yeah,
Then
that's
it all makes
interesting,
sense, doesn't it?
That does make a lot of
Body
sense.
dynamics. When you think of the millions and now billions of rounds that have been fired in cowboy action shooting, there's never been a fatality.
And it's interesting too because the major safety thing you brought up is a stirrup falling down and hitting the hammer, and that was the safety thing, and not misfires or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
But with any firearm, of course, you have to make sure that your finger's off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Make sure that the gun is lined up on the target before you put your finger on the trigger.
Have you, what do you call it, fantail?
Now, you asked about fanning. Can I tell you a
Fanning.
story?
Yeah.
All right. A couple of years ago, there was a show called Bones. Has anyone ever seen the show Bones?
Sure.
Okay, it ran for something like 13 seasons. Okay, in one of the seasons, the star, a gentleman by the name of David, he'll remain anonymous other than that, he had always wanted to do a cowboy episode. And so they wrote a cowboy episode in which he participated in the sport of cowboy action shooting. That was their way of combining this without doing time travel or any such a thing. And he wasn't really squared away on the intricacies of lever action rifles, single action pistols. And so he got a crash course in how to handle these things so you can look convincing on screen. So he says, okay, well, I want to get to this stuff. And I had just won a world championship. And so they had called in a bunch of cowboy shooters to provide atmosphere, correct atmosphere. And they said, talk to him. So he says, all right, I want to do this. When can I do that? And I said, well, if you do that, 3 things are going to happen. Number 1, to anyone that knows what they're doing, you are going to look a fool. Number 2, I guarantee you, if you're trying to shoot like this, that gun is going to be all over the place and you'll miss the target. And remember the 5-second penalty for each miss. And number 3, I guarantee you, because the guns they had were stock out of the box with lawyer-proof springs and hammers and things like that, about the 2nd or 3rd shot that you do this, you're going to open your hand up down to the bone and you're going to be one unhappy camper. And he says, well, really? Well, how should I do that? And I said, well, the way we do it is like this. There are a couple of different categories in shooting. You can shoot one-handed, the way they did in the Old West. This is called duelist. Cock the hammer, fire the gun. Cock the hammer, fire the gun. That's kind of slow. And the guys that want to go fast, do this. You take the firearm, you grip it in your master hand like so, and then with your offhand, rather than just gripping the pistol, you put your finger in the trigger bow and you manipulate the hammer. Like this. This way you can aim shots and at the same time manipulate the hammer quickly. Well, he says, well, that doesn't look cool at all. I said, well, what do you want to do? I want to do this. So I said, your beach, your chicks, do it however you want. Now, this show is paying something like, I believe they told me $10,000 a minute by the time you've got the crew and the film and the extras and everything that takes. So he goes up to the first stage and he goes, got. Medic! And the female star of the show, and I hope I'm not out anybody, who is an absolutely delightful human being, by the way, she walks up to me and she says, Mr. Turner, she says, I would rather not do that. Can you show me how that goes again? And if you see the episode, The Cowboy in the Contest, pay attention. I take a great deal of pride in the instruction that I gave her and how she paid attention to it, because she fires 1, 2, 3, 4, and then comes back down in 5. And you'll see her pull the gun out, goes 1, 2, 3, 4, waits a split second till she reacquires her sight as she lowers it and fires that 5th shot. It's good. It's good shooting, honestly, it really was. Side note, you're watching the little targets break. They weren't using steel plates the way they were using breakable targets because it looked good. There's a sniper shooting a gas gun at each of those targets, so they break every time, whether he hits them or not.
Nice. Nice. So, okay, so
fanning looks great.
Looks great, not realistic. Good to know.
Not for accuracy.
I checked when you're looking. I thought that hammer might actually have like a sharp pin on it or something, but it's just sharp enough as it is, right?
As you can see, these hammers, the springs have been lightened and stuff, but just the action of taking, if you're a karate master and you've been working out on the gravel bag or the rice bucket for 10 years, your hand will be tough. But otherwise, that's kind of the soft, fleshy part of your hand, and that hurts. So no do it.
Makes sense. So we talked a lot about the pistols. So you shoot some pistols. What's the next gun in the sequence? And let's look into that gun the same way we looked into these pistols here.
Lever action rifle.
Yeah.
Typically in the Old West, what you wanted to do is you wanted to have a carbine or a rifle that was the same caliber as your handgun, so that as you rode around the Old West with your belt full of cartridges, here we are, there's a belt full of cartridges, those cartridges would feed either the rifle or the pistol. So you'd have systems commonality. It's a good thing to have. It makes the loadout a lot easier, make sure you have ammunition. If you consider the burn time that a cartridge has in a barrel like this, you put it in a rifle, the rifle barrel is 3 or 4 times as long because there is greater burn time for the powder. The rifle is actually considerably more powerful than the pistol, even though it's shooting the same cartridge. Does that make sense? Okay. It's also an awful lot easier to hit what you're aiming at when you have a sight radius from here to here, as opposed to a sight radius from here to here. And then, the way you're holding it, it's a lot more stable. I'm going to show you some insider tricks. I teach cowboy action shooting, and so this stuff is solid gold that I'm telling you, okay?
What caliber did they use back then?
I'm sorry?
What caliber did they use?
That is an excellent question. Most of the calibers back then, in 1873, you were using a different kind of a propellant than we do now. They were using what's known as black powder, and black powder had been around since the Chinese invented it back in, what, the 12th century. It is a very inefficient propellant, however, and it burns kind of slowly, and it leaves an awful lot of residue. So you would take a cartridge using this inefficient propellant, stuff it full of black powder, put a big heavy lead slug. You couldn't drive it very fast. So what you did was you had the biggest, heaviest slug possible out in front of that cartridge. And you'd load your rifle up and you'd fire it like so. Now, as you're firing, the residue from the combustion process of the black powder starts gunking up the delicate inner works of the firearm. They're really, really dirty. So the popular cartridges were 4440, 3840, 3220, and things like this. This refers to the diameter of the cartridge itself. Of 4440, for example, is 44 caliber cartridge with 40 grains of black powder. A 3220 is a 32 caliber cartridge with 20 grains of black powder. But the thing they had in common was, because of the inefficiency of the cartridge and the combustion process, they were tapered or slightly bottlenecked cartridges. So as your firearm got dirty, the fact that they were slightly cone-shaped helped them get in and get out of this increasingly dirty chamber. Follow? Mm-hmm. Modern cartridges use a much more efficient propellant. We call it smokeless powder, and there are different kinds of it, but it's smokeless. It's much cleaner, much more efficient. So you don't have that problem, and it's much easier to load. So most cartridges today are what we call straight-walled cartridges, and that's what most shooters use here. By the way, there is a separate category in cowboy shooting for people that want to shoot that messy, smoky, smelly.
People who like to clean the gun, right?
People who like to clean their guns, and they're going to get a lot of practice doing it. So yes, these happen to be 357 Magnum. 357 Magnum, you can generally shoot 38 or 357.
That's a fairly readily available cartridge.
And it is probably the most ubiquitous cartridge in the United States. I'm sorry?
Yeah.
What?
That used to be regularly available.
Yeah, obviously you're a firearms guy. Since the whole pandemic, the firearms world has gone completely nuts.
Well, someone's got a lot of cartridges laying around.
I don't know. Well, you had a couple of things take place simultaneously, and this is a little off topic, but I do need to discuss this. The simple truth is, Remington Firearms Company, one of the most noteworthy firearms manufacturers on planet Earth, managed to go out of business in the middle of the biggest firearm and ammunition purchasing frenzy in the history of the world.
Remington.
Remington went under.
Wow.
Go figure. This.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get my head around the amount of hookers and blow they must have been doing in their weekly junkets to the Bahamas. How could you mismanage a company that badly?
But I mean, that's a fairly, like, half the ammo on the shelves was
1/3 of the ammunition was Remington. So one of the reasons you can't find ammunition is it's a double swing here, because Remington's out of the market, which in turn puts greater pressure on all the other suppliers.
And then everybody freaks out and buys a bunch.
And I can tell you there's a whole bunch of good old boys down in Texas and Alabama and Arkansas,
Yeah.
not picking on you states folks, but their wife is saying, honey, I can't get my car in the garage anymore. And he's saying, I'm just getting ready for the apocalypse, Megan.
Do you reload your own ammo?
That is a really, really
So
good
the question was, just so everybody can hear, if you guys ask questions out there, the YouTube can't hear it. So
okay.
I'm going to
The question was
rephrase any
asked-
questions that come up.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Repeat 'em.
Yeah, repeat them.
The question was asked, do you reload your own ammunition? The process of reloading requires, it is not a black art. You have to be utterly meticulous. You have to be very careful with what you do, but you have to do that when you're playing chess, for God's sake. And so it is that, yes, most competitors reload their own ammunition for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can tailor your load for exactly what it is that you're trying to do. When I go squirrel hunting, I take a 22. When I go bear hunting, I take a 45-70. When I want to shoot cowboy, I'm shooting a 125 grain bullet at about 650 feet per second, because the sport only requires me to make the steel go ding. Now, nobody's volunteering to stand in front of that.
Slowest.
Well, there are people who go slower, but again, that's a good modest load.
That's reliable. It'll cycle reliable. Well, I mean, you
so.
cycle it yourself, but
Yeah.
everything's reliable.
Yeah. It has to be. So when you load, you can tailor the cartridge. Number two, it cuts the cost of the cartridges by 2/3. Honestly, the amount of money that you save is considerable. That's important.
And you shoot enough that the economics
Boy,
are there.
do I.
How much do you think you save by reloading your own?
Again, 2/3 of the cost. This is one of those sports, and there are other sports like it, like yacht racing or racing P-51s around pylons. But this is one of those sports that if I ever sat down and computed the amount of money that I have in firearms, ammunition, travel, training, and things like that, I would be horrified. I would curl up into a fetal position.
Wouldn't you just be proud? You could
I
just be proud
suppose
about it.
That's another way of looking
You'd be
at
like
it.
500,000? Wow.
If you're going to do
Good for me.
something, burn. If you're going to do something, do it right.
Right.
So, what else can I tell you about the lever action cartridge?
Well, I'd like to see it. Can I see it?
This is an 1873 Winchester copy. Now, an 1873 Winchester has considerable value right now, so most people do not shoot originals, although we both know a couple of people who do, but you're beating up a pretty valuable artifact. So, bless the Italians and the spaghetti western. Back about the time the spaghetti western came out and started creating a market for these types of firearms, in northern Italy they started manufacturing them. And right now, they're manufactured to a very, very high level. This is an 1873 Winchester clone, and it's a good one.
So this is so how much did you just hand me there?
That depends on three things. Number one, is it an 1873, an 1892, an 1866, an 1894 Marlin? This is an 1873 Uberti, copy of the Winchester. It is that is a premium rifle. The way the rifle is built really does enter into how the sport works. This particular rifle is one of the oldest designs, but what it does is, may I, for just a moment?
Yeah.
What it does is, the ammunition is loaded via a side gate into the tube below the barrel. And we typically load 10 rounds for a competitive stage. When you work the action, a lifter block, you can see this little piece of gold here, a lifter block takes that cartridge, lifts the entire cartridge straight up, and then the bolt goes forward, pushes it into the chamber, you fire the gun, the bolt pulls it straight out of the chamber, spits the shell out, and brings another one up. The significance of that is this. By taking the cartridge straight up and loading it straight into the rifle, it really does eliminate jams. And there is a speed limit, literally, which we have experienced shooters have run into with every rifle out there in the market. 1894 Marlin, good rifle, but it's got a speed limit because it takes the cartridge out of the tube, points it up at an angle, and now as the bolt goes forward, it grabs the top of the cartridge and hopefully feeds it up. The cartridge has to turn the corner and then go straight into the chamber. And while that cartridge is being lifted up, it's kind of floating in the air. And the faster you are, the more it floats and it can fall out the side of the gun.
Huh.
So we haven't run into the speed limit on this particular rifle yet, but I can tell you right now, the fastest guys in the world can shoot 10 aimed shots in under 1.5 seconds.
Wow. That's crazy. And you know, I don't know if you can hear, but again, like the pistols, there's no slop in this action.
Absolutely.
Everything that you do produces a movement. There's no like backlash or anything going on here. It's really a fine piece of equipment.
You asked how much it costs.
Yeah, I did.
The retail on this gun is about $1,400 right now.
Well, that's not bad, but how much work to get it to this?
And that depends on who you have do the work. Now, the factory creates a competition, a theoretically competition-ready gun, which is okay if you're a second-rank shooter. If you want to have a gun done well, you plan on spending $350 to $500, unless you have the eccentric German shotgun boogie do the work. This is a German gunsmith who specializes in these kinds of firearms. He charges a lot, over $1,000 to make these things right.
But he doesn't mess around.
But you know what? It's like racing Ferraris. You simply can't beat one without one. He does not mess around.
That's pretty cool.
Anyway.
That's pretty wild. You guys can all hear that, and you know, if you'll let those people who would like to handle it after the meeting.
Anyone who would like to handle these, I brought these, and I have dummy rounds in appropriate firearms.
There are works of art. Okay, so the lever action, and that I do want to talk about Wild Bunch.
So do I.
But I want to. So the next gun is the side by side double
There are two
barrel.
kinds of shotguns, as we said. One is the pump gun,
Right.
which we talked about briefly. The other is a side by side. Now
the pump is allowed in cowboy action shooting.
one kind
Cowboys
of pump,
have?
that is an 1897 Winchester. The cutoff for cowboy action shooting is supposed to be 1898.
Okay.
And if the 1897 is
right there.
and it is, then it's allowed. This was because there simply were not a lot of good side-by-sides available when the sport started, but there were a bunch of these things laying around in pawn shops for $86 at that point in time. You can't touch it for that now. And so this was allowed in. I think quietly, the governing board wishes they'd go away.
Because they're just a little too modern looking.
It's a little too modern looking. This is the iconic look, is it not? The side-by-side shotgun, the old, the barkeep saying, "Not in my saloon."
It's a little long. Is that exactly 18 inches or
This
what's
particular one is of absolutely legal length. This one's a little bit longer. 18 inches would be about to here. I like a little tiny bit of extra sight radius. Now, when you're shooting cowboy, you are allowed to pick up shotgun misses only. Remember, you're loading the shotgun off your body, so if you should by any chance miss a shotgun, and shotguns are always knockdowns, if you should by any chance knock one down, they will allow you to reload and re-engage the target. And of course, the trick is the time added to reload and re-engage
Right.
the target. If a miss is 5 seconds and I can reload in 3.5 seconds, I've just made up a second and a half.
But I thought you weren't supposed to miss with shotguns. I thought that was the point.
That is a really good observation, and the simple truth is that Hollywood and the movies have really done a job on people. At the distances at which we're shooting targets, unabashedly from about me to the first 2 rows here, the shotgun pellets would generally be about the size of your fist. So if you have a picture of an entire wall being sprayed by this massive amount of pellets, that is not true. From here to there, it would be about fist-sized. And you can fiddle with that a little tiny bit by changing the choke, which is the last inch or so of the barrels. But generally, that's about it.
But you also risk, if it's a wider spread, not actually knocking the target
Having
down.
enough pellets on the target to knock them down.
So it's the same thing like in skeet shooting. Like you can wing it, and I guess it counts, but
No, it's got to go down.
Yeah.
In skeet, you break. If it
breaks,
comes
it
off,
breaks.
you're
Yeah.
good. If it breaks, it breaks.
yeah. But if this target doesn't lay down,
They've
that's a
gotta go
miss.
down.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
So
So again, you can reload that
Yep.
in less than 5 seconds
Yep.
and re-engage.
Yep,
And that's the key.
that is the key.
That's pretty cool.
Kind of
Okay,
fun.
so the pump. Tell us about the pump.
And the pump gun. The pump gun is, I can't prove this, but I can guarantee you that every single shotgun manufacturer in the world since this gun hit the streets in 1897, actually 1893. This was a modified version of the 1893. But I can tell you every shotgun manufacturer has walked their design staff into a little room, shown a cutaway of this particular shotgun and said, see this, see this, see this, don't do it. There is a joke about the 97 Winchester, and the reason they call it the 97 is because there are 97 ways to break your heart. There are approximately 103 parts, intricate little Swiss watch-like parts, all of which have to work together delicately and in harmony for this shotgun to function. Average modern shotgun has about 35 parts. So you have 3 times as many opportunities for stuff to go wrong. This is the kind of firearm that guys write songs about. Songs like The Wreck of the Old 97. And the reason they do is because these things, honestly, they're a heartbreak waiting to happen. These things are terrible. They are cantankerous. They are finicky. There's an old saying in cowboy action shooting, nobody owns 197. You have to have at least 3 of them. Why 3? You got the broken one that's at the gunsmith's, you got the one that just broke down in the cart, and the one that you're holding that just refused to fire. Go ahead, ask me.
How many times has that happened?
I'm the guy that wrote the song, The Wreck of the Old 97. I owned 13 of these. Wow. And
13?
I owned 13 of these things.
You bought some for $87, though.
I did not, unfortunately. But if I'm in it, I'm in it to win it.
So what do these guns run right now?
A good work. They stopped making them in 1956.
Okay.
Now, they made about 1.5 million of these things, so you'd think there would be a lot of them laying around, right? but they were used by the military, and those things get butchered. They went through all four corners of the globe, and those things have disappeared. Nobody knows for sure how many are still in the marketplace, but an entrepreneur about the year 2000 had a great idea. You know, the Chinese will build anything. If you take them one, they'll just reverse engineer it. And so what this entrepreneur did was he took a beat up old 1897 Winchester over to China and said, build me a couple hundred of these.
They built 100 beat up.
And they built, that's exactly right. And they built hundreds of these worn out, clapped out, crappy guns. It's
It's
hysterical.
really costing them a lot of money to wear out this part.
Just exactly right. And this happens to be one of the Chinese ones, although my competition one was one that was built in 1912, and it has stood me good for almost 20 years now.
So that's probably one of your least favorite firearms, just the heartache, so much heartache that you wrote a song about it.
Literally.
Did you put that video up there? That that's a video you should have included in your slide deck.
Oh my goodness, I'm sorry I didn't. But you know, there's an album called The Way of the Cowboy by Frederick Jackson Turner. We'll circle back to the Frederick Jackson Turner part 2 in just a minute. That is all about the sport of cowboy action shooting, with lots of songs like Shoot It Again, which is a song about missing shotgun knockdowns, and a song called the Oops song, which everybody calls the brain fart song, because there's an interesting thing that happens. You can train, you can practice, you can meticulously prepare your firearms, you can load, and Penny, do I do it? Chamber check every single cartridge preparatory to a competition. You walk up to the line, the timer goes off, and it's like a mystical thing that transpires. You sound the timer, and your brain disappears. It's hysterical. So all of these things are taking place simultaneously, and then you have to reload your shotgun.
It really does sound good, though. It's
look, I sound like I'm making a sacrifice.
the gunsmithing on that must be significant, though, huh?
If you know,
And that's the German guy. That's the shotgun maestro.
there are several people who are quite good at it, but once again, the German guy's the guy to go to. Shotgun Boogie, I'm shouting you out once again. I just talked to him this evening, by the way. He is currently in Etna Green, Indiana, where the Cowboy World Championships are taking place right now, and I'm missing it. It's breaking my heart. But I'm certainly glad to be here.
Can I see this one again?
Sure.
That sounds great.
So I noticed that this is really close to your hand. You ever nick yourself
How'd
on
you
that?
notice that? Yes.
Well,
again,
'cause I've
every
definitely hit
shotgun
myself.
manufacturer's been told, don't do that.
You know, because if you do, now that I notice that this is back here, you know, the slide release, you bring your hand up to release the slide, and look at that.
Rich,
Everybody
how
see
tall
that?
are you?
5'9".
5'9". The average height of the average individual back in about 1897 was about 5'6", and physically they were smaller. So if you can imagine yourself with a smaller hand, that might not hit your hand.
Just real close.
But one of the things that's so amusing about this, it is such a Rube Goldberg collection of parts. Would you like to see how this goes? Give me a split second. I have one more time, an empty dummy shell here, completely inert. I want you to watch what happens when you fire this gun. Do you see this piece that extends below the gun? Whoop, it's gone. Whoops, it's back.
Here,
That
right
is
into,
the lift.
right into that camera so we can see it as a
Here
little
we
bit
go.
close
I'm not
up.
going to point at the house, but
Yeah.
do you see you have parts coming back towards your eye, bouncing off your hands while you do that? And the trick is, you drop the shell in, and the lifter lifts the shell up towards the chamber. The flag keeps it from flopping out the side, something the Marlin rifle doesn't have. And then the bolt goes forward, slams it into the chamber. Pull the trigger, fire the gun. There are two little hooks on this big bolt, and hopefully they will extract the shell casing. Whoops, here it comes, good. As it comes backward, there's a little tiny piece of spring steel here that's gonna flip it out the side if you're lucky. Okay?
Worked that time.
Worked brilliantly that time. That's a piece of spring steel. How many times do you think you can hit that before it breaks?
I don't know.
Nobody knows. That's part of the fun. And so when is that little tiny spring steel piece going to break?
Right in the middle of the competition.
Absolutely, exactly. It's part of the joy.
Last round. One guy's 2 seconds behind you.
Spot on. I wrote the record, the old 97.
So now when
National champion.
does it stovepipe when there's like a failure to feed or whatever it's called on this gun?
There are a couple of things that can happen. Typically, the
Failure
problems
to
are
eject.
this will go out of time, so it loads the shell too soon, and the shell will not feed into the chamber, or it will fail to eject. And everything's got to be timed exactly. The spring tension on the two hooks on either side of the bolt has to be exactly balanced. This little kicker here has to have some life in it, or it won't come out. Once in a while, you do this, and it won't. Oh, I love it when it works the way it's supposed to. Once in a while, a shell won't come out, and you're trying to work at speed, and you put another one on top of it.
Yeah.
And now the monkeys are playing the organ, and everybody's laughing. Or the absolute killer, which is once in a while, you'll get one in backwards. And when you do that,
Just put it in the cart.
But the absolute kiss of death. A .357 shell casing fired out of a lever action rifle. There's a little tiny groove in the top of this bolt, this thing that goes up and down, and a .357 shell casing fits perfectly into there. And while you're shooting, should one bounce off the top of your hat and fall into the inner workings of this and slip into that groove, nothing short of an act of God will remove that shell casing. And of course, as the gun will not close, your instinct is to do what? Harder, harder, work it harder. And each time you do that, you're driving the shell casing harder and harder.
Right.
It's hysterical.
So when that happens, does that just round over? You're just like, oh, well. Like we just burn that round or what?
Most people, you can identify it fairly quickly. Most people will know that that's the problem. They'll put down the gun and take however many misses you've got. In a minute, we are going to talk about Wild Bunch, and when we do, I want you to see a couple of unique features on my Wild Bunch rig, which deals specifically with
So I want
.357.
to, let's pop this video up real quick since
Sure.
it's playing. Go ahead, Steve, put that on the big screen.
This is a Top Gun shoot-off. Oh, no, that's not. This is Wild Bunch.
Oh, this is
1911.
Wild Bunch?
What happened to my rifle?
Oh, there you go.
That's all right. That's using the 1911. You'll notice one of the big differences is, yeehaw. Thanks.
Well, let's back up. What is Wild Bunch?
Okay, Wild Bunch action shooting is substantially cowboy action shooting with three significant differences. Significant difference number one, you're using a semi-automatic pistol. What pistol? Specifically, a 1911 pistol that is John Moses Browning's greatest creation. John Moses Browning was the most prolific American firearms designer. He invented weapons back around the turn of the last century that are literally still in use today. Okay? In fact, the most produced handgun, I think, in the history of the world is the 1911 at this current time. There's something like 60 manufacturers in the United States alone. Okay, so you get to use a 1911, which is a semi-automatic pistol. And the reason it's called a 1911 is it was adopted for use by the U.S. military in 1911. And is it a dated and antiquated design? Well, in 2014, the U.S. Marine Corps bought $28 million worth of these things in 2014. And why did they do that in an area where you've got rail guns and lasers and drones? Because the darn thing still works. It still carries the freight. Now, let me ask you, would you drive a 1911 car to and from work, let alone think you could keep pace on the battlefield with one?
It'd be a VW Bug.
And this thing, World War II era, and this thing is still in use today. So you get to use a semi-automatic pistol.
Take a look at this. And this is a 45, right?
Yeah, 45. Got to be a 45. Sorry, it's a little bit dirty. I was using it today.
Yeah, I can smell it. What is the smell? What chemical?
Cordite.
Cordite. Yeah.
Smells like victory.
Yeah.
Go ahead and it's perfectly okay to try the trigger on that.
All right, dry fire it. And this trigger, again, very little. That's it right there at the front. But after that, there's no break.
I like just a little bit of take up in the trigger because again, this is an action sport. You're running to a halt, you're running to a spot, coming to a halt, bringing the pistol up, and I want to have just a little bit of give in the trigger so that I can feel it as it starts to break. But after that, it's got to be absolutely consistent every time.
Yeah.
So use a semi-automatic pistol, that's different. Use a lever action rifle, that's the same. But the lever action rifle must be 40 caliber or above. So now you're talking major league calibers, and so that you have a sense of scale, This is a cartridge that I am using for my cowboy guns. This is the cartridge that I am using for the Wild Bunch guns. Wild Bunch insists that you have a power factor, and these are big and powerful loads, but still a lever action rifle. You can use the 1897 Winchester or the Winchester Model 12. The cutoff date is 1912. These are both pump action shotguns. Here's the second real big difference, and that is the shotguns start loaded. So you get to use the shotgun the way God and John Moses Browning intended the shotgun to be used. That changes the dynamic of the game a lot, because now it's more on accuracy and less on how much skill do I have to manipulate the firearm while I'm using it.
So why is it called Wild Bunch? And where did that come about?
There was a movie, Sam Peckinpah movie. Has everyone here seen by now at some point The Wild Bunch, which is a William Holden movie? It takes place in about 1912.
That's where everybody gets shot, right?
In Mexico. And if you remember the film, it has, I think, still the longest shootout on record. It's about 12 minutes, and it's glorious Peckinpah, just giant gouts of blood splashing everywhere, people getting shot and flying backwards into windows and walls and stuff like that. This movie was named The Wild Bunch, and the guys that started the sport back in the early 1980s, they called themselves The Wild Bunch. And the guns that were used prominently in that movie were the 1911 and the Winchester Model 1897. Now, I said I wanted to show you my Wild Bunch belt. This is my Wild Bunch rig. You got pouches for the magazines in front. That's all standard stuff. Got a place to put your your pistol to put your holster in. That's all standard stuff. But there are a couple of other things I can't help but notice are present.
Yeah.
It's like Batman's tool belt here. You go up, these guns were never meant to be shot as fast, as hard, or as often as we shoot them, and stuff is cocking up on them all the time. You watch a Wild Bunch match, and I'm not trying to undersell the sport, it's great fun. You watch a Wild Bunch match and you will wonder, how in the hell did we ever win a war? The variety and ways that a firearm can screw up on you in the middle of a match is hysterical. And of course, oftentimes it has to do with poor preparation, a firearm that has not been properly fettled, etc. And the answer to how the heck did we ever win a war is quite simply, the Germans had the Luger and the Japanese had the Nambu. And if you think these are bad, take a look at those designs.
So what do you use a flat-headed screwdriver for in the middle of a match? On the 1911?
These darn grips have a tendency, oh, that was loose, to come loose once in a while. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing? Did they come loose?
No, that I have a screwdriver.
Oh.
And that I found it before the match this Sunday. There are screws protruding all over this thing, and it's important. That one's a little bit loose. I was just using that today. Let's get that nice and snug.
So is Loctite against the rules?
You can use
Yeah, horse
Loctite,
glue?
but if you Loctite it, now you can't take it apart
It's the blue Loctite,
when
right?
you need it.
You gotta use the blue stuff.
So, and then the simple truth of it is, once in a while you have a jam, and when you have a jam, you're using this to pry stuff out. You'll
So
notice it's a very
multi-tool.
fine point.
Yeah, it is
So,
a fine point. So what's the knife for?
And the knife is for when the match is over.
There's one last dummy that you have to shank.
This is, honestly, this fulfills many functions. You're forever cutting a piece of leather, a target, or something like that. But when the match is over, this is something the Europeans brought to my attention. When the match is over and the guns are put away, then the alcohol comes out, as do the crackers, the salami, and the cheese. And it's really, really, if you don't have one of these things, you're not getting a chunk of the cheese.
That's great.
I'm not making that up, by the way.
I believe you. So what's your, is it more fun to do Wild Bunch or Cowboy, or are they equal to you? What's your
That
favorite?
is a subjective evaluation, and different people, I know some people love Cowboy, have no use whatsoever for Wild Bunch, and vice versa. The truth is, I really, really like them both. I have enjoyed every kind of shooting sport that there is at one point or another. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not necessarily a gun guy. I like competition. If I'm not doing this, I'm racing motorcycles or surfing or playing baseball or something. I really like competition. There is a saying in cowboy action shooting, you come for the shooting, you stay for the people. And I've got friends literally all around the globe as a consequence of cowboy action shooting. Again, we had a conference with a couple of them on our way down here, a couple of people who are out in the Midwest. They just wanted to say hi because they were distraught that I wasn't out there. It was just saying hi to friends. So I really like the camaraderie of cowboy action shooting. I really, really do. Wild bunch is more difficult. The targets are more distant and it's more demanding of the shooter. And boy, it's tough to say, but if I really were forced to pick one, I'd probably pick wild bunch because of the greater challenge. You literally have to be an accomplished shooter to win at wild bunch. To participate, you just have to have the gear. And I would make the point that you don't really have to have the gear. If you'd like to try cowboy action shooting sometime, you go to a cowboy match. Like I said, there is one every Saturday and Sunday in Southern California within 60 minutes of where we're standing right now. And you go, you watch, you ask a couple of questions. Someone will stick a shooting iron into your hand and say, would you like to try this? That is how it is, honestly. Honestly,
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Sport.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, what we like to do as we kind of wrap up is we like to take questions from the audience.
Sure.
Well, actually, you know what? We haven't seen enough videos.
Oh,
and I know there's a lot of
fire
videos
up
in there,
videos.
Steve.
I've got some.
So before,
I am not the fastest guy in the
I want to
world.
show some people his videos. Let's see some of this stuff because we've talked about it. But now that we kind of have an understanding of what it is,
Yeah.
let's see these actual videos here. So why don't you cue some of these up and you can just kind of narrate.
Okay, this is one taken at Panorama Sportsman Club. I'm a member. Now you'll notice you've got the faux dummy, the dummy horse. So you're picking your rifle up off the horse, put it on the table, shoot your pistol. Couldn't be easier. They're in a row. But you can't miss, so take it a little time. And then the shotguns. Piece of cake. That about 17? 2-0, yikes.
So that was 20 seconds
That was
and
20
24 rounds.
Yeah.
Nice.
Targets are a little bit remote, and you'll notice there was a lot of motion on the stage.
Yeah, you're moving. So each time you change a gun, you're moving. You never go back and repeat guns or anything like that?
Sometimes there are different kinds of stages, of course. Sometimes you're shooting from inside of buildings and you run outside of buildings. Sometimes you run down range, shooting to the left, shooting to the right. There's no such thing as an orthodox standard other than the fact that most stages are 24 rounds.
24, and everybody's pretty much happening under 30 seconds.
No. The top competitors, and unfortunately I did enter at that point in time. One of my dear friends, Michael, I was just out shooting with him today. Michael, like we were talking about earlier, Michael will spend thousands and thousands of dollars getting the best firearms possible, getting hotel rooms in remote locations, doing all the things that it
Yoga
takes
the night before?
to go to a match, absolutely, to go to a match, because he wants a clean pin. He wants a button that says, you shot the match clean. He is shooting 60-second stages. I am shooting 15-second stages. Which one of us is having more fun?
Who's winning?
I don't care. Each of us, it's a big tent, and each of us is having fun our own way. And we're both dressed like 12 years old, and the guns are real.
So again, the clean matches, no misses.
The clean matches, no misses at all.
He's basically aiming.
He is doing the marksman thing. He will
Yeah.
not miss a shot. One of the sayings in the sport is you can't miss fast enough to win. But one of the sayings in the sport is if you don't miss once in a while, you're not pushing yourself hard
You're not
enough.
going fast enough, right?
I like this is really kind of a quaint sport. It's really amusing. And it's kind of cute to watch. It's like Disneyland, but the guns are real. A couple of years ago, I had the pleasure of hosting a television program which pitted 3 of the top 3 gun shooters in the world against 3 of the top cowboy gun shooters in the world. The Cowboys won.
Were they each using their respective?
It was a 3-stage match.
Okay.
One stage, the modern shooters had to shoot cowboy guns. And one stage, the Cowboys had to shoot modern firearms. And then one stage, they each shot their own firearms on the stage. Cowboys won.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're using single action and you're used to doing that, like theoretically the advancement of firearms has made it easier to hit targets, right?
Modern guns do more of the work for you.
Yeah.
But the simple truth is, with a single action pistol, again, you're cocking for each shot, that forces you to engage with the firearm, and that forces you, I think, to concentrate more.
And this is significantly heavier too. Does that aim or is there just a ton of kick on this thing?
At a high rate of speed, anything you can do to attenuate the recoil is a plus.
Because, I mean, that's a lot heavier than...
A good shooter, though, will
Yeah.
fire 5 shots, again, depending on the distance and size of the target. A good shooter can fire 5 shots in a second and a half.
And when you're shooting your second shot, like mechanics-wise, are you just kind of timing it until it comes back down on target, or are you actually looking down that sight and seeing it before you pull the trigger, or what's going on in your head?
Part of it, that is a really, really good question. If I am shooting single shots, I'm absolutely engaging. You saw the last stage we looked at where there were 5 shots in a row. Did not have any dumps or anything.
Right.
When I'm shooting dumps, generally it's how fast can I get the shots off, and I will trust myself and my skill level to keep the firearm steady. But single shots, man, you do have to aim each shot.
Right.
Again, that 5-second penalty is like a vulture out there waiting for you.
Let's watch that second to last video. I think we put one second to last. Can we see that one, Steve? Was that it? I remember the last 2 videos.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the Top Gun shoot-off. This is the most exciting thing in cowboy action shooting. 2 guys, I'm on the far side of this, unfortunately, but you'll see we're both shooting an identical stage. First guy to finish wins. He's using a side-by-side, I'm using a pump. I finished before he has. Reload a shot. Knock down the plate. Look how close it is.
And he knows when he hears that other one go, it's like, ah.
It's really difficult to do this because no matter how much you try and stay focused, you're absolutely correct. No matter how you try and stay focused, you can always hear that other thing going on. And when he hears me go to the shotgun a split second ahead of him, he's going, he's ahead of me, I gotta speed up.
And you're both, you can tell you're both on the same stage because there's a pause in the action.
Right.
And then it's
From target to target, and you kind of know where you're standing.
All right, before we play the last video, what was the deal with the last video? It's not up yet, but
actually betrays some of my skills with modern firearms. So let's just take a look.
All right.
Here. If you want to take that about halfway through, because there's 2 magazines and a little bit of talking in the middle of it.
It's fine.
All right.
That's real fast. The single action.
Ooh, he likes that. Give me another magazine, please. Thank you. Can I have another loaded one? Yep, that's it. Anyway, that's it. Yeah, that's using a fully automatic weapon, which is something else I possess considerable skill with. You'll notice the barrel stays completely flat and all the shots are hits.
Yeah, I did notice that for every report you heard from the weapon, you heard a ting ting.
I like shooting stuff. What can I say?
So we're going to take some questions.
Sure.
Steve, are there any questions in the chat? Ask that, and while we're doing that, if Alec, you want to pass the mic around, I see Jeff Holmes back there has a question. And please speak into the microphone so the people watching on the internet can hear.
Should I go ahead?
Yeah.
Jeff Holmes, 1148. There was a movie in Hollywood, Jimmy Stewart in the 50s, called Winchester 73. And his claim to fame in Hollywood was it was the first time an actor got a profit participation. And I never saw the movie, but I think the whole premise was this rifle he was carrying was so revolutionary. What was it about the 1873 Winchester that made it so special?
This is a terrific question. All right, if you can imagine, the Civil War was a watershed in firearms design. Unfortunately, one of the things that we do as a species is we kill each other with amazing and constantly improving efficiency. Everybody in Europe was watching the Civil War here in America because it was the first test of modern weaponry. Rifled barrels to make more accurate weapons. There's a famous American general was killed by a shot reputedly to be almost 1,000 yards, which was unimaginable in the area before that from the Brown bus, the Brown Bess blunderbuss, that sort of thing. Anyway, but prior to this is black powder, and this is how you loaded a black powder musket. You take your powder, you pour it down the barrel. You put on top of that a patch. You take a ball out of a little pocket here, and you put the ball on top. Remember what I said, these are large, heavy balls because you couldn't drive them fast, so you had big, heavy balls that would do real damage. You take out a ramrod, and you ram this whole mess together, and you have to make sure that you press it tightly together because if you leave an airspace, the firearm can blow up on you. So you pack it tightly together like this, then you take that ramrod. It's very important you not lose that because if you lose the ramrod, what you have here is an expensive paperweight in the little battlefield. You put that ramrod back under the gun so it's right there again when you need it. You bring the gun up. Civil War technology, we no longer had flintlocks. You had a little tiny musket cap, a percussion cap. So you'd cock your hammer back, reach into a different little pouch, put that little tiny cap on top of that little tiny nipple, make sure it's fully seated, cock the hammer the rest of the way back. Now, how long did that take? I've got 10,000 guys banging away at me. Guys next to me are having arms and legs and heads blown off. And my job is to send it. And I'm supposed to unconcernedly be loading this gun. Now, there are lots of anecdotals. Actually, there's a lot of factual evidence that guys would sometimes get so panicked, they would just start loading and loading and loading. And they found some at Gettysburg that had, I believe, 12 to 18 musket balls stuffed into this thing, because guys would just panic. They'd seize up. Imagine what a breakthrough it was then when you had a gun that had a self-contained cartridge, and you could load 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 cartridges in the gun. And instead of having to stand there looking like a fool while you're loading the gun, you could lay down. Lever it, fire it. Lever it, fire it. The rate of fire. A good, well-trained black powder muzzle loading shooter can maybe get 3 rounds off a minute. There's an awful lot of stuff going on around you in 1 minute. One of these things, literally as fast as you can shoot and load. The rebels, who did not have that technology at the outset of the war, called the lever action rifle that damned Yankee gun that you could load on Sunday and shoot all week. It was absolutely a revolution.
So yeah, I was going to ask, like, what armies had this huge, like, disparity in technology? So that was the North versus the South? Like
North versus the South is, well, there's a school of history, and I know we have some anthropologists and historians here. There's a school of history that says all of human history is the struggle between the offense and the defense. And the minute someone has one technology, you have to have the next technology. Whether it's the Egyptians having early bronze, and then along comes the scourge of the Hittites, whether it's the Greeks having the good fortune to be on a rocky peninsula that has lots of iron ore, so their weapons were better than their neighbors. Whatever the heck it is, there's always something that leads you to the next step. And what's the classic saying? Winners prepare for the last war, losers for the next. So while we were still using muzzle-loading rifles, everybody in Europe is saying, clearly that doesn't work. What can we do to make it more efficient? And the constant race was limited by the ability of black powder to do the job. So they came up with the idea that if a lever action is good, maybe a bolt action would allow us to get a more powerful cartridge into the gun. That extends our range. If I can start shooting bad guys at 500 yards, and he can only shoot me at 300 yards, I win. That's the Franco-Prussian War. During the Spanish-American War, one of the biggest revolutions in modern history had taken place. That is, smokeless powder supplanted black powder. And when Teddy Roosevelt charged up Kettle Hill, which immediately adjacent to San Juan Hill, where the battle actually took place, when he charged up that hill, many of his troops and the troops surrounding him were loaded with black powder, single-shot, spring-filled trapdoor rifles. The Spanish were using modern Mausers. One of the reasons Custer lost at the Battle of the Greasy Grass, the Little Bighorn we call it, in some cases, the Indians were better armed than he was. He had modern cartridge weapons, but they were single-shot because he was constrained by what the U.S. military would give him. The Native Americans, bound by no such constraints, went out and got the best guns they could lay their hands on. In many cases, were better armed.
That's fascinating. That's a good question, Jeff. Thank you. Other questions from the audience here?
Go.
Not after that one.
Yes, hi. I was wondering if, about when you're shooting the model 1911, is this close combat or close, the targets are close? I know the gun's not very accurate, is it?
The gun is intended to be reliable, and there's an old saying in the Army, you should have as much motion side to side as you do back and forth. And pity, if you will, the poor firearms designer, because everybody wants a firearm. Everybody wants a pistol that'll shoot a group that big at 25 yards. But they also want that thing to go bang every single time, and I don't care if there's mud or sleet or snow or wind or if it's got 10,000 rounds through it. Well, the simple truth is, the more precisely you manufacture the weapon, the tighter the tolerances are, and you're starting to flirt with reliability, because the littlest tiny bit of grit gets in there and the gun won't chamber completely. So there's this delicate balancing act between precision and reliability. The simple truth is, most of these things are better than we are. And we were shooting targets. We were just up at the California State Championship. I had a great run of luck there, by the way. And what would you say the longest target distance was for those who shot them with the pistol? The bell, would you say that was 40 yards?
Oh, about 40 yards, 40, 45 yards.
So yeah, there are targets out at 40 yards. Can you engage that successfully with the 1911? Absolutely. If you're willing to take the time and squeeze the shot. That an answer? Yes, sir.
Can I ask one more question? I gotta ask. Rifleman, what was he shooting?
It seems like this is your favorite question to ask.
The simple truth is, no, that's a wonderful question. He is shooting either an 1892 or an 1894 Winchester. Both of these were follow-on designs to this, and they were both built to accommodate the greater pressures created by modern smokeless powder. This is a terrific design for what we do, but it uses a kind of a knuckle design, and it's not very strong. It derives its strength from when the knuckle is in a straight line. A Model 92 has two huge slabs of steel that go up and lock the bolt in place. That sucker's not going anywhere. Model 94 has one huge vault-like piece of steel that seals the back of it. So when you see Lucas McCain, what was it? Chuck Connor's, Lucas McCain, when you see him shooting the gun, he had a nail behind or through the lever, and as he closed the rifle, that nail would fire the gun. And much like fanning a gun, you'll notice he always shot like this. Because I don't need to aim, because I'm Lucas McCain. There are a couple of videos out there, and you can look them up on YouTube, where they compare him walking down the street going kapow, 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 to a modern lever-action rifle shooter, and I assure you we're all faster than he is.
Nice. I bet you're more accurate, too.
I think that's a pretty safe bet.
Have you ever done one of those things where it watches where your muzzle goes? Like there's a tracker and it plays back?
We have one of those at home, and I'm just starting to use it. And actually, it's especially useful for the pistol, because the simple truth is, there's a saying in cowboy action shooting: you win with the shotgun, you lose with the pistol. And the reason we say that is because, remember, the shotgun starts empty. The faster you can load the shotgun, that's all dead air. So we spend an inordinate amount of time learning how to load, not even shoot the dang thing, just learning how to load the shotgun and empty the shotgun as quickly as possible. Win with the shotgun, you lose with the pistol. Why? Remember that short sight radius I was talking about? It's very easy to come off target. It's very easy to have too much finger through the trigger and yank down and left, or too little and yank high and right. It's easiest to miss with the pistol, and you make up time with the shotgun.
So you have a little trainer that shows where you're...
So having that little trainer, having that little device, he's talking about electronic device, you put it down the bore of your pistol, and it slaves to your phone. And you pick up a target, and you aim at it, and you squeeze the trigger, and you can track on your phone what your firearm did from the moment you squeezed the trigger. And it is, what is the word I'm looking for? I wanted to say humbling, but I will go with
enlightening.
Enlightening in the very best possible.
Well, no, wait, when I saw it, I did it in a trainer at the Navy, and they're like, here's where all your barrels went, and we're just like, oh, no.
Enlightening, I'll go with enlightening.
Yeah, they're like, that's not good.
Warm, cozy.
I didn't think I pointed my gun at you. I guess I did. They're like, yeah, you definitely did.
Yep.
All right, any more questions, or do we have any questions in the chat back there? We got two. Great. Alec, you raised your hand. Oh, you got a mic?
Yeah.
He's all set.
So you've shown a impressive collection of American firearms from that time.
You've got an Italian one.
My question to you is, are there any foreign weapons from that time that you can say compete right alongside the American weapons?
Well, starting with the fact that I'm using a Chinese shotgun, an Italian lever action rifle, and a Spanish side-by-side, that's a pretty impressive collection. You mean weapon designs from that period of time? The truth is that the single-action revolver was adopted by the U.S. military because it fired a big, powerful cartridge, which back in the day, look, the enemy meant you harm. And a .45 caliber pistol would disable an enemy anywhere, if you hit him anywhere in the major peripheral region where the organs are. It was a reliable stopper. You could drop a buffalo in the great bison hunt of 1870, was it 1872? Grand Duke Alexei used a Russian model Smith & Wesson #3 and dropped a buffalo at 100 yards with one pistol shot. So these are no fooling around rounds, okay? But they're slow to employ each shot. And to unload this thing, there's a circus act. Cock the gun to half cock, open the loading gate, and one at a time, there's a little tiny rod that goes underneath the barrel. Push the rounds out. Now imagine you're galloping across the prairie on a horse, and you have 20 or 30 pissed off Union cavalrymen or Native Americans chasing after you. Tell me how you achieve this. The answer is you literally don't. There's also a great piece of literature that I read, and I encourage you to look up, during not the Sepoy Mutiny, but I think it was the Afghani War of the 1870s. A British soldier who was armed with a Colt Navy was caught in close quarters with a couple of, it was during one of the Indian mutinies. He was caught in close quarters with a couple of Indian swordsmen. And he pulled out his pistol and he shot the first guy, and while he was trying to get the pistol cocked for his second shot, the other guy came and cut his arm off. This makes it very difficult to shoot the pistol, of course. And then proceeded to make a brioche out of him and stab him to death. And so the British got away from this design and they went to double action pistols. Because with a double action pistol, all you had to do was squeeze, and the thought was, if he had been able to just squeeze the trigger, he might have survived that encounter.
And then you mentioned too, the reloading on this is so difficult. You said you had to half cock, right?
This particular one, I've had that removed, so you don't
Oh,
have to
okay.
half cock it.
So it can't be cocked at all, right? Yeah. And then you actually, they don't fall out. Oh, they do.
These are nice and clean.
But the actual.
After they've been fired, the case swells slightly, and they're in no big hurry to come out.
So I guess the engineering
So you have to use
solution.
the ejector rod, which is below the barrel, to push them out.
Right. So the solution to this was to have the cylinder come out.
There were
Right.
two ways of doing it. Smith & Wesson, a competitor to Colt, engineered a pistol where you flipped a latch and the gun broke open. And
I've seen it,
there
yeah.
was a little extractor that pushed all 6 empties
It's
out
the Indiana Jones gun.
simultaneously. That's from that era. But then you still were faced with the problem of getting the cartridges back into
Right.
the gun rapidly. The reason the 1911 exists is because you can slide a magazine into it and bang, 7 fresh rounds, and you're ready to go. That's a whole lot easier, isn't it? In fact, early 1911s, you had a little ring here and a little ring on each magazine. The idea being you would have a lanyard. So if while you were galloping across the plains, you dropped your pistol, it's still down here bouncing along. And as you would fire each magazine, you'd push the button, split the magazine out, come out magazine, you'd spit the magazine out, and you could just let the magazine fall, and it was held by a little retention strap. So when things quieted down, you could gather up your magazines, reload them, and go back about your business.
That's fascinating. All right, any questions from the chat, Steve? No chest? Okay. Well, Mark, thank you for coming by.
This has
We
been such
appreciate
a
it.
pleasure and an honor. You have a marvelous
Yeah.
facility, and I love
Thank
your
you.
crowd. Thank you very much.
All right,
I really
and
appreciate
for
it.
all those people on YouTube, we'll see you next week here at the Adventurers Club. Thanks for watching.